Alright, what's up everyone? Op Soldier here today, and today we're actually going to talk about something that's actually unrelated to, well, it's related to DNF Duel, but it's related to the upcoming Street Fighter, you know, kind of like the metagame or the mechanics of the game. This is modern controls versus classic controls. So I have been very vocal quite recently about modern controls versus classic controls. And this is just simply because I have more knowledge on fighting games now. And when I gain more knowledge on fighting games, I become vocal about specific situations or specific designs in games. Because as far as I'm concerned, with the knowledge comes the fact that things are going to change with specific designs in games. So for example, modern controls versus classic controls. So I'm just going to go ahead and read over the tweet that I said. So I said, I think this was yesterday, I said, why are people acting like modern controls won't have a huge potential to change Street Fighter? Did we not just play DNF Duel where people are delay DPing, one of the best offense options, I meant to say defensive options in the game, and I'm DPing people into Oki for 3 offense on reaction to jump-ins because it's 1 button. So the DP into Oki that I'm referring to is related to Ken, because from what I understand, at least in Street Fighter 5, Ken has Oki off of his DP. So if he does a delay DP or a DP in general, just DP, DP's a DP, if you get hit by it, he gets offense. So the reason why I made this tweet is because I've seen a lot of people recently acting as if like modern controls isn't gonna change the game in any drastic way. I don't know where this basis is from, because like every single like pro player and content creator that I've seen so far that's talking about modern controls versus classic controls, like there's clearly going to be some changes. Like from what I've read so far, I haven't had access to modern controls yet, because I almost don't even want to try them, because like I don't feel like that's what Street Fighter is. But we'll talk about that at the end of the video. I'm a little confused because we've come from games where they've simplified inputs and it changed the game drastically, like crazily. Like for example, this is the perfect example. You know, I've competed in this game, so I can say for 100% fact at this point that like easy controls made this game even more busted than it already was, right? So for example, you know, if I'm Striker here and Berserker does like any offensive combo into knockdown, right? I don't have to do a DP on reverse. Oh my gosh, if I can't even do it because I'm using the controller. Normally I don't use a controller, I use a hitbox. But like I don't have to do this DP motion like as I get up. Like I don't have to do it, right? See, even I'm messing up the execution right now because I'm not used to using a controller. But like I don't have to do it, right? I could just press down and I get my DP. Now the reason why this is very powerful is because if you're in a situation when you're on defense, first of all, Striker's DP is plus for the most part, right? Like you can only really punish it with another DP. So that alone makes it a very powerful and roll. Yeah, I guess you could punish it with roll technically. Actually, you can't really punish it because she could just do DP into MS. And that's safe. But Striker, because of this, Striker doesn't really, like I don't have to time my DP. Like let's say you're applying pressure here. You know, let's say you're a Striker player, you're applying pressure against me as a Striker player. I could just delay my DP at any point or mash DP at any point. And if I delay my DP, you're not going to be able to tell where I'm going to throw that DP out. Like, yeah, there's going to be gaps, but that gives me a very strong defensive option, because if I delay my DP in your pressure, I'm probably going to hit you. This is so common in this game. I've seen this happen to Sonic Soul 1,000 times. He's complained about delay DP. This is something I mentioned months ago. I said, dude, I was telling my friends like delay DP is really powerful, and he's like, no, it's not powerful, just wait. And I'm like, yeah, but if you just wait, they're just gonna take their turn back. Like if I sit here and I block waiting for delay DP, the Berserker's just gonna swing. So Berserker is very, like, or not Berserker, delay DP is a very powerful option. It has completely changed how DNF Duel plays. Like, you're not going to see people DP late. You know, I mean, you'll see them DP late in pressure, but it's not going to be as common just because of the lack of access to the button so quickly. the fact that you can't just press down and DP in some games like KOF, you're going to see less reversals as a delay, right? Like, they're usually going to be timed within the pressure. They're not just going to be thrown out there hoping that they can get their turn back. Now, a lot of people will say DPs are minus, they're punishable. That's never mattered, guys. Like, I know they're punishable. People aren't going to throw them out 24/7. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that delay DP is a powerful option on defense. It doesn't mean that it's going to be constantly used. Just because something's a powerful option doesn't mean it's going to be constantly used, you know? I feel like that's another thing I have to dispel. It's just the idea that delay DP is a thing. It makes it harder to shimmy. You try to walk someone down, they do a DP, you're forced to block. If you walk someone down in a shimmy, they can just mash because, like, you're expecting the DP. See the kind of issue here? Like, it makes it harder. And this is just one example. I mean, I've heard plenty of different other examples about how, like, people are doing, you know, frame one, you know, super moves, stuff like that. You know, I've said this, you know, I already said it in the tweet, like, the game is going to change. It's going to be different. The fact that modern controls and classic controls are so vastly different than each other. The fact that modern controls allows you to get special moves out more and gives you less options. The modern controls gives you less options. I get that. I totally understand that. That's, you know, I grasp that. It does less damage, yes, but we just came from a game like, you know, MK11 where Cetron's hitting you for 13%. And other characters are hitting you for 30-40%, and people still play Cetron. Cetron was top 1 in the game. So damage isn't always the answer. Sometimes, like, having access to moves and having better neutral, which might mean more special moves that are easier to access, could be a reason to why you would want to use modern controls. So anyway, what's the point of this video? What is the point? What am I saying? Well, first of all, I'm saying, the game is going to change. None of this even matters, right? I'm using these examples to explain that the game is going to change. It is not going to be 100% what Street Fighter was before, right? You know, before, to get a DP motion, for the most part, 99.9% of characters, you had to do the DP motion. Like, to get a DP, you had to do DP motion. There was no other option. Now, all of a sudden, we have an option in Street Fighter to do the DP without having to do the DP motion. That is going to change the game. That is objectively going to change the game. Now, why was I okay with this before? Well, I was okay with this before because I thought that modern controls was more of an idea of getting into the game. It was not a particular control scheme that people would use to compete in. But, you know, I've been hearing things and, you know, reading articles where pros are apparently trying to unlock modern controls and see some of the options and just like, you know, nooks and crannies and how good modern controls is compared to classic controls. So the last two things I want to kind of talk about in this video, this related to modern controls and classic controls, is that this idea that, well, I guess, yeah. So this idea that, like, I'm saying I can't, like people will kind of shame you, right? This is very common in the FGC. I've noticed this is just a real common thing. People love to shame people when they disagree with them. People will shame you, right? They'll tell you, oh, well, you're afraid that there's going to be more competition. Well, we're not really afraid. I'm not really afraid of more competition. It's more so the game is not going to be the same. Like, for example, I learned a DP motion in Street Fighter. So the game is, like, objectively not going to be the same. There's going to be people that, like, they might never have to touch classic controls if modern controls is a viable option. I just think personally that doesn't make sense in a game like Street Fighter. It's like going to KOF and taking out all the motion inputs. Like, it just doesn't really make that much sense in the game. It's not DNF Duel, it's not Grand Blue Fantasy Versus, it's Street Fighter. So it doesn't make sense to me why they were ever going to do it. But I was okay with it just strictly based off the fact that I didn't think it was viable. I thought it was just a way to get people into the game so then eventually they would learn it and they would learn what Street Fighter actually is, you know. At least as far as I know it. Now I know before we've had characters in Street Fighter that are easier to play, which is different. That's not the same thing as Ryu having access to a one-button DP when he's never had access to it before. Those are two completely different arguments, which is another kind of thing that I feel like a lot of people will say is they'll be like, well, you know, we've had this before. Well, that's not really what I'm talking about. I'm more so talking about the fact that every character has access to it now, therefore unlocking other potentials, right? The final thing I want to talk about is how people mask this, right? So I've noticed this in the FGC. This is a very common thing. It kind of makes me uncomfortable. A lot of the times people will say things because they want modern controls in because they want more accessibility for players, which is fine. I'm okay if some people say that because then we can have that discussion. But what they're usually doing is they're trying to kind of almost like be like, oh yeah, that's not that good, you know, modern controls isn't that good, you know, they get a 20% damage nerf. Oh, you know, you're just not used to playing against, you know, players that have an advantage over you because they don't have to worry about execution. Like they'll say all this stuff and you're sitting here like, okay, so the reason why you're making this argument is because you want more accessibility for players. That's what it sounds like, and you're just trying to kind of mask it with other things to kind of bolster your point. And the reason why I don't like this is because what happens is these things end up getting kind of lost in the weeds. So for example, I tell people all this all the time, hey, like I play DNF Duel, like you guys don't understand how powerful one button inputs are. Like they're very, very powerful. I can react to jump ins with a DP. That's like crazy. I can like I still struggle to do that in KOF just because I have to do the actual input. In this game, I just press down, right? And people will like they'll do all this mental gymnastics when what they're really just trying to say is that they want more accessibility for players, which is fine. You know, we can have that discussion, and that's the discussion we should have. We shouldn't make the excuse that, oh well, the balance, blah blah blah. No, like if you want more accessibility for players, just say that, so then we can talk about that. The final thing I wanted to talk about is why I have a personal kind of like, even despite competing in Street Fighter 6, like wanting to compete in it, and even despite, you know, wanting to play the game and get better, you know, better at fighting games no matter what changes, because I feel like this happens a lot too. Like people are like, oh, I'm not gonna play the game. Like I don't want to play Street Fighter 6 for other reasons. It's mostly drive impact. Like I don't really see like that's like I'm gonna play the game and still learn it, but I have a feeling that I'm not gonna like drive impact. I already didn't like MoDerN back 3 and Ermac like EX push from MKX, so I'm a little worried about like how drive impact's gonna work. So that's unrelated to all of this. And I feel like sometimes people think like this is a reason why like I wouldn't be playing the game, and that's not why. Like it's not easy. Like if everyone got one button inputs, it's whatever. I play DNF Duel. I know how the game plays. You got to play around it. I don't think it's good. I think it's not a design mechanic around Street Fighter. Like Street Fighter having modern controls just seems weird to me. But that's not going to stop me from playing the game. But my whole point that I wanted to make at the beginning, which I'm bringing back now, is that my issue with Street Fighter getting modern controls is I have a bunch of NRS friends coming over to Street Fighter, and some of them I already feel like they're never going to want to learn the motion inputs, which is weird to me because that was kind of like my rite of passage into Street Fighter, and it's not like they can't learn those inputs. It's not like they have a disability or anything like that. It's just Street Fighter's handing them an easier way to play the game, like legit just handing them an easier way to play. And I don't know how I feel about that. Like I feel like if games are just gonna get easier and easier and like we're gonna start removing execution, I just don't feel very comfortable with that. I don't think that that's a good direction for a game like Street Fighter. Again, DNF Duel was marketed that way. DNF Duel is a new game. You know, Grand Blue was marketed that way. As far as I'm concerned, Grand Blue is a new game too. I don't know if there was a game before that. So those games were marketed that way. They weren't really established brands that decided to change their controls. Now, I know MK did too, but they changed it a long time ago in the 3D era. They've been since rebranded. their inputs. So I don't know where we go from here. All I'm gonna say is that like the fact that people are saying that this is not going to change the game is absurd. It is going to change the game one way or another, especially if MoDerN controls is allowed in tournaments. It's going to change the game. One button specials is just too strong, man. Like, it doesn't matter what the nerfs are. Like, they're just really powerful options. And the fact that, like, you can get, like, one button, you know, well, not one button supers, but one frame supers, like you guys don't know, man. Yeah, it's just, I mean, because the thing is in this game, too, right? So, people would do one button DPs, right? Or one button moves. And they would go into burnout and you'd guard break them, but people would still do it because it's just a powerful option. It doesn't matter if you can guard break them. Like if they don't have me, because like that's another thing people will say is they'll be like, oh, DNF duel wasn't that big of a deal when you use one, but no, it was a big deal because you would go into burnout and then people could guard break you because you didn't have mana to guard cancel. So it was a big deal in DNF, but people still mash DP all the time because it was one button. They can mash it. It's going to change the mechanics of the game. It's going to change the metagame and how the game is played. That is just irrefutable that it's going to do that. Now, is it going to be for better or is it going to be for worse? We don't know. All I can do is show you so far what I've seen competing in DNF Duel. So take with that what you will. And please, people, stop saying that it's not going to be that big of a deal, because it is a big deal. It's completely changing the fundamentals of what Street Fighter originally was when it comes to even just anti-airs in general, you know. So it is what it is. That's fine, you know. Again, I want to stress, like, this is not going to stop me from competing. It's just something that I've been thinking about and been like the game's going to change. Like, the fact that the inputs are easier, the game's going to change. Like, unless the control scheme is completely unviable, the game is going to change. So anyway, you guys have fun playing fighting games, have a good fight, and I'll see you guys later.